1966. South Vietnam. The first light of dawn is just beginning to filter through the jungle, deep in the heart of an American military division's base. A few meters below the surface, Viet Cong commanders are eating breakfast. Directly above them sits one of the largest US military installations in the country. American officers are watching their soldiers get killed in their own tents. No enemy has breached the perimeter. Helicopters are being sabotaged. Food stores are being emptied. But no one sees anything. No one hears anything. Then someone looks down at the ground. A tiny hatch, barely wide enough for a human body. A rope dangling below it. By the end of this video, you will understand one thing. Winning or losing the Vietnam War had nothing to do with weapons. It had everything to do with how many meters underground you could go. Let's start with the numbers, because they tell the whole story. 1968. At the peak of the Vietnam War, the United States has 536,000 soldiers stationed in South Vietnam. Daily expenditure, $66 million. The total tonnage of bombs dropped exceeds the combined bombing of every front in World War II. B-52 bombers carry 27 tons of ordnance per sortie. Napalm, Agent Orange, chemical weapons, landmines, laser-guided rockets. All of it aimed at North Vietnam and the Viet Cong. And on the other side, villagers from the Sikai district, 40 kilometers outside Ho Chi Minh City, armed with shovels, pickaxes, and bamboo baskets. Simple hand tools for digging earth, and an anger decades in the making. When faced with this kind of imbalance, what is the rational response? Surrender? Resist head-on? Or do you invent one of the most creative survival strategies in all of human history? The people of Sikai chose the third option. They went underground. A brief history of the war. Why did it last so long? Let's be clear about something up front. Most people's mental image of the Vietnam War is incomplete. Most think of it as a conflict that began in the 1960s and ended in 1975. But the reality is far more layered. Vietnam's struggle against foreign powers dates back to the 1940s. First the Japanese, then the French, then the Americans. Each generation learned to fight using lessons inherited from the one before. The tunnels were born from that same continuity. During the resistance against French colonialism in the 1940s, the Viet Minh began digging the first tunnel networks to move secretly between villages. Initially only a few hundred meters long, these passages served as communication corridors, weapons caches, and hiding spots. The French were defeated and left in 1954, but the tunnels remained, and people kept expanding them. When the Americans arrived in force in the 1960s, what they found was something they were completely unprepared for. An underground city that had been continuously expanded, deepened, and organized over 2 full decades. Everything begins with the earth itself. The Sikai district's reddish, laterite-rich clay can be excavated with hand tools, but once exposed to air, it hardens like concrete. The tunnel walls strengthen themselves over time. This same soil was impermeable to gases, yet allowed trace oxygen through, making long-term underground habitation possible. American 7.50 kilogram bombs landing 45-50 meters from a tunnel entrance had almost no measurable effect. The tunnels run across 3 distinct depth levels. The first, at 3 meters deep, withstood mines and armored vehicle tracks. The second, at 6 meters, housed command posts beyond reach of conventional airstrikes. The third, at 12 meters or deeper, was impenetrable even by B-52 carpet bombing. Passages between levels were deliberately narrow enough for only one person to crawl through. Any force trying to enter in numbers was bottlenecked instantly. Their shafts were concealed inside termite mounds. When the Americans deployed 2,000 sniffer dogs to find entrances, the Viet Cong scattered ground pepper around openings. Dogs fell into uncontrollable sneezing fits and became useless. Excavated earth, tons of it was carried out at night in baskets and disposed of in bomb craters, rivers, and construction sites. No pile was ever left near an entrance. Aerial reconnaissance found no topographical trace of the network. A typical entrance measured 40 by 50 centimeters too narrow for the average American soldier. Hidden under vegetation, beneath riverbanks, or under villages' floors, they could be locked from the inside. Finding the entrance was rarely enough. Life underground ran on a rhythm opposite to the surface. Days were spent below ground. At night, fields were tended and attacks launched. There was no electricity, or lamps were used sparingly to preserve oxygen. Many fighters adapted to such low light they could move in complete darkness. Cooking was solved by the Hohen camp stove, a network of pipes that redirected smoke far from the fire, dispersing it through multiple small vents so no plume could be detected from the air. Cooking happened only before dawn, Underground hospitals performed genuine surgeries with instruments fashioned from bomb fragments, transfusions via bicycle pumps, and anesthesia so limited that some procedures were performed without any. Malaria struck nearly half of all tunnel fighters at any given time. Schools operated by candlelight. Weddings took place with bombs sounding overhead. Children were born in the dark. Vietnamese singers performed underground before audiences of armed fighters. Inside that compressed, lightless world, humanity persisted. The Viet Cong's trap philosophy was coldly calculated. A wounded soldier is more expensive than a dead one. Carrying him requires 2 to 4 additional men. Unit morale collapses. The operation slows. That logic drove 11% of all American casualties and 15% of non-fatal wounds in Vietnam achieved with materials that cost almost nothing. Holes filled with fire-hardened bamboo stakes coated in feces. Stakes were angled inward. Easy to fall into, impossible to extract without worsening the wound. 2 pits dug side by side ensured the soldier rushing to help fell into the second. So effective, it was formally banned by the Geneva Convention in 1980. Venomous snakes inside bamboo tubes released when a soldier opened a trapdoor. The bamboo pit viper called the 3-step snake by Americans produced a powerful hemotoxin. Scorpions were placed in buckets behind hatches. Wasp nests were connected to tripwires. One triggered nest sent an entire unit into chaos without a single shot fired. The bamboo whip, a bent pole held under tension, when triggered the sharpened tip struck at over 100 kilometers per hour with no warning sound. The log drop, a spiked trunk falling from directly above a direction no American training had addressed. The cartridge trap, a bamboo tube, a live round. A nailless soldier's own weight fired the bullet upward through their boot. Cost, essentially zero, and the Viet Cong booby trapped their own dead. A soldier bending over a fallen comrade triggered the mine beneath. Captured flags were wired American soldiers' instinct to take souvenirs turned against them. The name came from a mistranslation. An Australian officer at a 1966 press conference called his men tunnel ferrets. An American journalist wrote rat. It stuck. Requirements were strict. No taller than 5'5", lean build, and a psychological profile unlike any other soldier. Approximately 700 men served across the entire war. Equipment was minimal by design. 1 flashlight, 1 pistol, 1 knife, a length of string. Many switched from the standard 45 its muzzle flash-blinded dark adapted eyes to suppressed revolvers or captured Vietnamese weapons. Nick Sanza, 5'4" and a self-taught martial artist, described his survival logic. I always chose the dry tunnel. The Viet Cong used the dry ones. The wet ones were flood traps. He estimated the tunnel red survival rate at 3%. Of the 700 who entered this role, 36 died inside the tunnels and more than 100 were wounded. The experience they named Black Echo. Absolute darkness. Hearing your own heartbeat through the earth. Moving through space where death waited at every corner with no map and no knowledge of what lay ahead. The enemy tunnel fighters knew every corner by memory. When American tunnel routes were captured, the Viet Cong treated them differently with a kind of respect, recognizing in them the same courage they demanded of themselves. A 7.50 kilogram bomb landing 45 meters from a tunnel entrance had no measurable effect. The tunnels were built not in straight lines, but in broken, angled paths that absorbed and redirected blast energy at every turn. Ordnance expert George Dvorsnak spent months developing solutions. He wrote, "No technology could replace those small, agile men. Gas was pumped in bulk through entrances. The Viet Cong responded with water traps, small chambers permanently filled with water at tunnel junctions. Gas, heavier than air, could not pass through. The network was divided into sealed sections. Flooding worked on shallow tunnels. Nothing below 12 meters could be reached. The most radical solution was Operation Cedar Falls, 1967. Ben Isusi village was forcibly evacuated, burned, declared a free fire zone, and the tunnels were bulldozed where accessible. Within months, the area returned to Viet Cong control. Historians later described Sikai as the most bombed, shelled, gassed, defoliated, and generally devastated area in the history of warfare. The tunnels outlasted all of it. The Tet Offensive was planned inside the Sikai tunnels. Tunnel rat teams who discovered the Viet Cong district headquarters seized 500,000 documents, including maps of American bases, supply route intelligence, and an assassination plan targeting Robert McNamara. The US repelled Tet militarily, but Viet Cong fighters had entered the courtyard of the American embassy. A public told, "We are winning, watched it happen live." The the psychological war was lost entirely. The tunnels, located kilometers from Saigon, had made it all possible. The Ho Chi Minh Trail was not one path. It was a 120-mile network of interconnected subroutes through Laos and Cambodia, parallel corridors, underground hospitals, supply depots every 10-15 kilometers. The NSA's official historian called it one of the great achievements of military engineering of the 20th century. Its most surprising logistics element, the bicycle. Modified French Peugeots with reinforced frames and extended handlebars carried up to 225 kilograms of cargo. Silent. No heat signature. Undetectable from the air. Thousands of bicycle porters made the passage year after year. Elephants were also pressed into service. Once American Air Forces learned supplies were being carried by elephant, any detected movement became a target. Vietnam's domesticated elephant population was decimated. The US response in Laos, officially neutral, was the most intensive aerial bombing campaign in history. Over 2 million tons of bombs between 1964 and 1973, twice the total tonnage of the entire Pacific War, against a country America was not officially at war with. Approximately 80 million unexploded ordnance remain buried there today. Every year, around 300 civilians are killed or wounded. The war ended in 1975. The deaths have not. There was no enemy uniform. A VC fighter was a farmer by day, a soldier by night. That ambiguity pushed American soldiers toward a paranoia that made every civilian a potential threat, creating the conditions for tragedies like my Alea. The tunnels deepened this further. Every step raised the question of what lay beneath, turning the ground itself into a source of dread. Vietnam was where PTSD received its first systematic clinical definition. Tunnel rats showed distinct symptoms: enclosed space trauma, fear of darkness, hyperactive responses to sudden sounds. Nelson Ritter, 50 years later, could not hold back tears. Nobody asked. Nobody wanted to ask. He described being called a baby killer as he stepped off a plane in California. On the Viet Cong side, the ideological framework was clear. Individual death was a contribution to the collective struggle. Of 300 VC fighters who defended Sikai at the start of Operation Crimp, only 4 survived to see there was end. The rest kept fighting anyway. Ho Chi Minh had said it plainly decades earlier. You can kill 10 of my men for every one I kill of yours. Even at those odds, you will lose and I will win. April 30th, 1975. Saigon Falls. The road they ran along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, protected by the infrastructure the tunnels had built and sustained for decades. The tunnels did not make the Viet Cong invincible. They suffered devastating losses, but they made the war last longer. And a war that lasts long enough exhausts public support in a democracy. The American public lost its belief that the war could be won. Politicians withdrew. Saigon fell. Today, the Sikai tunnels are a tourist site. Ben Din and Ben Duoc receive visitors from around the world who crawl through widened corridors and see the conference rooms where TET was planned. The legacy extends far beyond Vietnam. Soviet operations in Afghanistan, opposition tunnels in Syria. The networks in Gaza all reached for the same playbook when facing a technologically superior enemy. Vietnam gave that playbook its most systematic, most enduring form: 250 kilometers, the Sikai Tunnel Network. The distance from London to Birmingham, dug by hand, 12,000 miles. The Ho Chi Minh Trail, nearly half the circumference of the Earth, 45,000. Vietnamese who died defending Sikai, 700. Tunnel rats, 36 died inside. More than 200 wounded, 11%. American casualties caused by booby traps by bamboo and wire, against billions in technology. 80 million. Unexploded bombs still buried in Laotian soil today. The Vietnam War is the most documented proof that technological superiority does not guarantee victory. But beyond that, it teaches something else. Human will, even in the darkest conditions, produces astonishing creativity. Teachers by candlelight, surgeons using bung shrapnel as instruments, engineers hiding ventilation inside termite mounds, bicycle porters carrying 225 kilograms through mountains. All of it born from desperation. All of it, over time, transformed into tactical genius. If you visit the Sikai tunnels today and spend even a few minutes in one of those narrow, dark corridors, you will feel something. This Earth is carrying something very heavy. Living inside a tunnel while bombardment rolls overhead, your child being born in that darkness. Hundreds of kilometers dug by hand, every meter paid for in human life. This is not just a war story. This is the story of what humanity is capable of under the most extreme conditions imaginable. And the most powerful scene in that story is still down there, beneath the earth, waiting in silence. Thank you for watching. If you love taking this kind of deep look at the hidden faces of history, don't forget to subscribe. In our next video, we'll tell the story of another war's, another underground world's hidden chapter.